the real lives of World War II soldiers and more tonight. You're invited to take a quiet journey into the distant, muted echoes of a world once engulfed by war. But this isn't a tale of explosions or victories, not one of drama or adrenaline. Instead, it's a gentle immersion into the stillness behind the storm, into the daily rhythm of life during World War II, not for the heroes in the headlines, but for the millions whose stories settled quietly into history. Close your eyes if you'd like. Let your mind slow its pace, and imagine yourself not in a battlefield, but beside a campfire that barely warms the boots of exhausted men. Imagine pages of a worn-out diary, filled not with battles, but with longing, routine, and cold fingers holding dull pencils. We'll begin in the frozen forests of the Ardennes, tracing the weary steps of soldiers who marched through snow and silence. From there we'll rise slowly onto the beaches of Normandy, not in the chaos of film scenes, but through the cautious, trembling hands of those who packed their rucksacks the night before. And finally, we'll pull back the curtain on a quieter front, the world behind the general's maps, where secretaries typed through the night and jazz softened the tension of orders and operations. This is a story told slowly, deliberately, and gently. The lives, the environments, the quieter truths. Let's begin. Why it sucked to be a foot soldier in the Ardennes. Imagine yourself standing in the dense, skeletal forests of the Ardennes, where the trees stretch tall but thin, their bare branches like skeletal arms reaching skyward in winter silence. Snow clings to the bark, the wind threads through every gap in your wool coat, your boots are wet. Again, it's late 1944, and the Battle of the Bulge is about to unfold. But you don't know that. All you know is the biting cold, the silence interrupted only by the soft crunch of boots through snow, and the gnawing ache in your feet. For the average Allied infantryman, the Ardennes campaign was a study in discomfort. The enemy was near but invisible. The trees offered little cover, but even less comfort. No campfires were allowed. Smoke could give away your position, so you relied on thin blankets, body heat, and hope. Each morning began not with a bugle or a whistle, but with stiff fingers trying to lace up boots that had frozen overnight. If you were lucky, your socks were dry. If not, well, that's when trenchfoot began to whisper its warning. Trenchfoot wasn't a wound. It was a slow, creeping rot brought on by constant moisture, cold, and pressure. Socks, once soaked and unwashable, became dangerous. Soldiers learned quickly that dry socks were worth more than cigarettes. In this environment, something as small as a clean pair became a currency of survival. Meals came from metal tins, cold rations. Sometimes congealed, sometimes frozen. You'd peel back the lid with numb hands and eat while crouched in silence, always aware of the possibility of distant gunfire. Spam, powdered eggs, occasionally if supply lines were generous, chocolate or hard candy. Sleep came in shallow pockets, 30 minutes here, an hour there. You'd wrap yourself in a damp blanket, curl behind a log or in a dugout, and drift between dreams and duty. There were no pillows. Helmets were your only cradle. Letters from home arrived when they could. A note from a sister, a picture from a wife. Most were read slowly, reread often, folded carefully, and stored next to the heart or the belly someplace warm. Boredom was the unspoken enemy. Long stretches of nothing, interrupted by chaos. Soldiers played games with stray cards, wrote poetry in their notebooks, or simply stared into the gray. One man, Private Stanley Keller, wrote in his diary, "The trees don't talk back. The snow is all the same. I haven't seen the sun in 5 days. I dream of my mother's kitchen, not for the food, but for the sound of a kettle boiling." And then, there were the boots. Leather cracked from exposure, laces frayed. To march through the Ardennes was to learn the geography of pain. Blisters, sores, feet wrapped in newspaper for insulation. Yet through all this, the soldiers marched. Some joked, some sang quietly. Some muttered prayers or remembered the lyrics of a swing tune played back in Paris. Their rifles were heavy, but their minds heavier still with the weight of expectation. The memory of lost comrades, and the thin hope that spring would come soon. Occasionally, the trees would echo with distant artillery, but more often the forest was still, still enough to hear your own breath, still enough to hear the frost crackle in your hair. This was the daily rhythm of the Ardennes infantrymen, a constant struggle not of combat, but of endurance, not of strategy, but of survival. And as we leave these frozen woods behind, we prepare to descend into the calm before another storm. A sandy shore lined with doubts, prayers, and salt-slicked uniforms. But this time, instead of snow-covered woods, imagine a quiet harbor in southern England, the sea still dark with night, the air thick with salt, oil, and the faint scent of nervous anticipation. It's June 5, 1944, and across hundreds of vessels bobbing gently in the cold waters, young men sit in silence, waiting. You're one of them. Your boots are laced tightly, your uniform itches slightly beneath the straps of your life vest, and in your breast pocket, a folded photograph creased from repeated glances, worn like a ritual. There's noise, yes, but it's muffled. The occasional cough, a whispered joke, the slosh of waves against metal hulls. But mostly, it's just waiting. In the lead-up to the D-Day invasion, soldiers were briefed in small, dim rooms with maps pinned to canvas walls. Phrases like "hit the beach and establish a foothold" were used often. But for the average infantryman, none of it felt real until they boarded the Higgins boat, a flat-bottomed landing craft that would carry them toward the unknown. Imagine standing there, shoulder to shoulder, packed in tight. The boat rocks gently, your rifle is in your hands, not out of fear, but habit. You've trained for this, you've run drills, but nothing no manual or commanding officer can prepare you for the crawl of minutes before the ramp lowers. The ocean breeze smells faintly of gasoline and brine. As the sun begins to rise, barely breaking through the low clouds, you see faint outlines of the French coast, Normandy, a name you'll never forget. Some of the men try to pray, others grip their dog tags tightly. There's no drama, no shouting, just breath held in unity, a shared space of thought and fear. When the ramp eventually falls, it doesn't fall into glory, it falls into chaos. But tonight, we won't focus on the sound of bullets or the crack of mortar. Instead, let's stay low, close to the sand, and move through the moment as one of them. Imagine the cold sea rushing into your boots as you step off. The water grabs at your knees. Your pack is heavier than expected. Sand kicks up around you. Someone falls beside you, but you don't see who. You keep moving, not from courage, but because stopping feels worse. You've been told what sector you're in, maybe Omaha, maybe Juneau, but it doesn't really matter. All that matters is forward. You climb the beach in short bursts, crouching low, using anything for cover: driftwood, tank traps, craters. Hours blur into themselves. Time breaks down into strange fragments. 5 minutes crawling on your elbows. Another 10 loading a jammed rifle. Another eternity crouching behind a dune as shouts echo around you. And when night comes, because eventually it does, you dig a shallow foxhole near the dunes. Your hands are blistered. Your ears ring. You've eaten nothing all day, but your stomach doesn't protest. You just sit there, helmet pulled low, staring at the sea. Somewhere inland, officers are studying maps and drawing arrows across paper. But here, on the sand, there's no strategy, just survival, inch by inch. In the following days, more troops land. Supplies arrive slowly, and so begins the slow, muddy, grueling push into occupied France. But that first day, that beach hit, never leaves you, not because of the violence, but because of the silence that followed it. The way the sky looked over the surf, the way the sand still stuck to your knees hours later. A young soldier named Harold Jensen later wrote in his letter home, "We did not land like heroes, we landed like men, half awake, half afraid, fully human." The beach was not a battlefield, it was a beginning. D-Day was not a moment of cinematic glory for those on the front line. It was hours of crawling, of sand in your teeth, of glancing sideways, wondering who made it and who didn't. It was heavy boots, tired eyes, and the taste of salt in your mouth, not from tears, but from the wind, and from those first few boots on sand. A campaign was born, but for many who survived that day, what remained was not the victory, but the rhythm of breath. Step, drop, crawl, rest, over and over again. Let's now leave the beach, and turn to something strange, something that existed not in foxholes or trenches, but in whispered rumors and secret expeditions. The war wasn't just fought with bullets, it was also pursued through symbols, myths, and lost cities. Nazi occult obsession, fact fiction, and lost expeditions. Imagine it's a cold evening in 1937 Berlin. The city hums softly in the distance. Inside a large stone building tucked between rows of government offices, a small, dimly lit room flickers with the gentle light of gas lamps. The air inside is quiet, eerily so, the kind of silence where even the soft turning of a page feels loud. In that room, 3 men in dark uniforms sit around a heavy wooden table. The table is covered in scrolls, old books, hand-drawn maps, and photographs of ancient ruins. One of them is tracing a set of strange symbols with his finger, muttering quietly in German. Another is carefully writing notes about an ancient Sanskrit passage. The third is holding a compass, turning it slowly, trying to align it with something drawn centuries ago. This was not a scene from a fantasy film, it was part of real government activity during the rise of Nazi Germany. At the heart of it all was an organization called the Ahnen, abruptly meaning ancestral heritage. It was created by Heinrich Himmler, the powerful SS leader who wasn't just interested in military control, but in something far more unusual: rewriting history to serve a myth. You see, Himmler believed that history had been told incorrectly. He imagined that the ancient Germans were not just tribes wandering forests, but noble descendants of a powerful race, perhaps even the most advanced people of early Earth. This idea wasn't based on science. It was based on selective legends, pseudo-history, and a desperate desire to prove racial superiority through ancient myths. To do this, he founded the Ahnenerbe in 1935. This organization didn't plan battles. It planned expeditions to places like Iceland, Tibet, France, Norway, and even the Middle East. Their goal wasn't oil or territory, it was ancient knowledge, lost languages, forgotten civilizations, and maybe, just maybe, magical powers or artifacts that could help shape the future of the Reich. Let's take a slow walk through some of their most surreal missions. The Tibetan Expedition, 1938. Imagine yourself walking up steep stone paths, high in the mountains of Lhasa, Tibet. The air is thin, the wind is sharp, and the sky is the bluest blue you've ever seen. This was the setting for one of the strangest expeditions of the era. Led by SS zoologist Ernst Schaefer, the Nazi team arrived not with guns but with measuring instruments, books on ancient languages, and cameras. They took photographs of monasteries, measured the skulls of local villagers, and collected plants and artifacts. Officially, they were studying flora and fauna, but behind closed doors, the team was looking for traces of an ancient Aryan civilization that they believed had migrated from the mythical north. Yes, some believed that the Aryan race originated in a lost land known as Hyperborea, a place described in ancient Greek texts as far to the north, full of wisdom and light. And so, they climbed mountains, visited temples, and quietly questioned monks not just about Buddhism, but about creation, myths, ancient visitors, and hidden knowledge. Did they find what they were looking for? Not really, but their notes and photographs were archived in Germany as part of a growing and increasingly strange puzzle. France, the Holy Grail, and occult architecture now. Let's step quietly into the cool, stone corridors of a medieval abbey in southern France. In 1942, German officers arrived not as invaders but as seekers. They walked slowly through old cathedrals and monasteries, studying carvings, stained glass windows, and underground crypts. Some believed these buildings held clues to the Holy Grail or other sacred Christian relics, items they thought could give supernatural power to whoever possessed them. One officer in particular, Otto Rahn, an archaeologist and SS member, believed that the Grail wasn't just a cup, but a symbol of spiritual purity, hidden away after the fall of the Cathars, a medieval religious group persecuted in southern France. He wandered through ancient ruins, caves, and castles, looking for signs, symbols, or tunnels that might lead to lost relics. The locals found it strange. A war was being fought, but these men were following myths like knights from a storybook. The search for Hyperborea in the Arctic now. Close your eyes and picture endless white, a frozen sea, icebergs, the low hum of an aircraft engine cutting through the Arctic air. Somewhere below, in the icy expanse of Norway, Iceland, and Greenland, Nazi researchers believed they could find evidence of Hyperborea, that mythical land once said to be the home of gods and giants. They studied glaciers, collected fossils, and measured rock formations. They believed the ancient Indo-European ancestors may have migrated south from this northern paradise, bringing knowledge with them. Of course, there's no proof of Hyperborea, there never was. But these missions were real. They were funded, documented, and sent out with full government backing. Runes, rituals, and Himmler's castle. Now let's slowly walk through Wolfsburg, Castle Dark, fortress-like building that Heinrich Himmler tried to turn into a spiritual headquarters for the SS. Inside were black stone floors, candlelit halls, and a large circular room known as the Hall of the Dead. 12 pillars lined the room, meant to represent SS officers in a kind of pagan knightly order. In the center, a sun wheel, a strange occult symbol echoing both Norse myth and medieval mysticism. Himmler imagined this place as the heart of a new religion, one built on Germanic myth, occult philosophy, and twisted racial theories. He hosted ceremonies there. He built a library of magical texts. And he dreamed of a future where Germany wouldn't just be a military empire, but a spiritual one too. Myth, theater, or strategy. Now, as we take a slow step back from all this, you might be wondering how much of this did they truly believe. Some historians say Himmler was a true believer. Others think much of it was psychological warfare, creating a sense of myth, of destiny, to inspire loyalty and obedience. The SS runes, the Totenkopf skulls, the swastika were part of this symbolic world, designed not just to threaten enemies, but to mesmerize followers. But for the average soldier in the trenches, this world of ancient mysteries and magical thinking felt impossibly far away. For them, the reality was wet boots, canned food, and silence broken only by the sound of distant shells. Still, these occult ideas filtered through the edges of wartime propaganda, whispers of invincibility, of destiny, of ancient power rediscovered. In the end, the war was not won by myths, but these beliefs shaped the ways some leaders saw themselves and their place in history. Now, let's step out of that dark castle, away from the libraries and maps, and turn toward the warm lights of a quieter world, a place of jazz music, typewriters, and whiskey tumblers. Because while most lived and died in foxholes, a privileged few waltzed through the war in far gentler surroundings. The war behind velvet curtains. Life of Nazi elites far from the front lines. Imagine a place where the war barely touches you, where the air doesn't smell like gunpowder or blood, but like furniture polish, strong coffee, and perfume. The boots are polished, the floors are spotless, and outside the tall frost-covered windows, Berlin moves slowly under a gray winter sky. You're in a Reich ministry building, or maybe a high-ranking SS officer's private estate, or one of the many residences acquired quietly through war spoils across Germany, France, and Poland. Here, war is not trenches and cold rations. It's memos and cigars, silk curtains and quiet piano music. A world where generals sip brandy while moving markers across maps, and secretaries type coded reports with red nails and soft classical music playing faintly from the radio. This is the elite life inside the heart of the Nazi machine where privilege created a bubble around horror. Your day starts not with an air raid or gunfire, but with slippers on parquet floors and a steaming cup of dark German coffee, served in delicate porcelain by a house servant. You button up a pristine uniform, comb your hair back with pomade, and sit down to a newspaper printed just hours ago by a state-run press. Every headline carefully crafted, every word approved. You already know what it will say. Victory is inevitable. By 9 a.m. you're walking under stone arches into the Reich Chancellery, nodding to fellow officers. You work in policy, or maybe in economic planning, or propaganda. Your job isn't loud, but it's powerful. You write memos that decide how resources are distributed, what films are made, which books are printed, which art is stolen or destroyed. All while far away, people starve in camps or fight for their lives in blizzards. But here, you're warm, well-fed, surrounded by clean suits and soft-spoken assistants. By late afternoon, your work slows down. You sit in a private lounge, dimly lit, heavy velvet curtains drawn. You play a slow game of chess with a fellow colonel, while a young woman in uniform plays a soft melody on a piano in the corner. The room smells of cigars and aged books. Some men read poetry, others gossip about promotions or upcoming balls. You talk about strategy, not suffering. You argue about aesthetic philosophy, Goethe versus Wagner, not about wounded comrades or supply lines. You may not fire a gun, but your signature can sentence 10 people to a labor camp, or approve the transfer of priceless art from Paris to your personal collection. Yet still, in this room, everything feels civilized, even beautiful. That's how the delusion survives. Now it's evening, and you've been invited to a party, something formal. You arrive at a private villa, lit with glowing lamps and filled with laughter. The women wear silk gowns and black lipstick. The men drink schnapps and champagne. A string quartet plays softly in the background. This could be Paris, or Munich, or even Warsaw. The location changes. The mood never does. Everyone's pretending they don't know, or pretending they can't see, or pretending this whole strange empire they've built will last forever. The chatter is low and polite. They dance slowly. The war seems very far away. When you return home late at night, you loosen your tie. You sit on the edge of your bed in silence. The city outside is dark, blanketed in blackout curtains. You feel guilt, maybe a flicker, but it's buried under the sound of your phonograph playing a Strauss lullaby. You tell yourself you're just doing your job. You're not in the camps. You're not pulling the trigger. You're just a cog, a well-dressed, educated cog. You turn off the light. The sheets are clean. The silence is thick. And somewhere far away, a train whistles in the night.